All right. Hope everybody's doing well. This is Apeuro Video 1.5 Hipp analysis. This is basically the document analysis that is known based on the AP rubric. So basically, Hipp is what I'm going to be referring to with document analysis, and O is for the outside evidence, which we're going to get to when we get to actually writing the DBQ. So first of all, the acronym Hipp stands for historical context, intended audience, purpose, point of view. The outside information are things that come outside of the 7 documents that you were provided when you're writing the DBQ. So it's pretty straightforward, and don't worry about outside information. We'll get to that later. The important thing to remember with Hipp analysis is however you analyze the documents, whatever you pull from your knowledge, the idea is that you need to take your understanding of history and explain how your analysis influenced what was written in the document, or why it was written. What was the purpose behind it? Were they trying to convince somebody of something? If you can remember that you're explaining what you know about in history influenced what was written in the document or why it was written, Hipp is super easy. It's that when that clicks, you'll be able to do Hipp for the rest of your life. And it helps with like current events and stuff like that as well. So first of all, how it works. This is for the document-based question essay, which we're not going to start for another month or so, but I want to practice working on Hipp as we go so that you feel more comfortable with it. You combine that with a thesis, outside evidence, put it together, and create a DBQ essay. So you're only going to need to do one of the 4 for each document. You don't have to do historical context, intended audience, purpose, and point of view for every single document. You only need one. It's when a grader or a reader is grading your essay, they look, and if they see like point of view, it's like check, you have 1 Hipp. If they see another point of view, check. That it doesn't have to be spread out. So if you are really good at like point of view, or you're really good at historical context, you could potentially get all the points and not use any of the other 3. You could, in theory, find all 4 for each document. Some kind of lend themselves to certain skills and others don't. I'm going to kind of show you how that works. Now, the first one, historical context, this is, it's important, and it's really, I'm going to talk about context a lot this year, because it's one thing to look in like 2020, what's going on in 2020, go back 200 years and say, oh my gosh, this is horrible, because you're taking it out of historical context. You're taking something that happened a long time ago and you're placing it into the context of today, which isn't really what historians are supposed to do. So what you need to do with this for historical context is you are explaining what was going on at the time the document was written that influenced why the document was written. So for example, if you had on September 12th, 2001, you had someone say, I care for firefighters and police officers are the bravest people ever. Well, what influenced that? 9/11 happened the day before. So that's an example of historical context. Now, if somebody said, I appreciate and I respect firefighters and police officers so much on September 10th, 2001, the historical context is different. Even though it was written 2 days separate, 2 days difference, it could have been influenced by something that hadn't happened yet. So chronological reasoning is really important with this. So what you look for to get the clue, if you're going to use historical context, you look for the year and the location of where it is written. If you recognize the year, and you will recognize years by the end, if you recognize the year that it was written, and you recognize the location, and you know what happened before that year, what was happening, then that could be historical context. You explain wars of religion or whatever. So here's an example from a few years ago. This is a tweet by Maritza Ritz-Willis. She wrote, got picked up by the fire rescue. Thank you. One of you had connections, and all I can say is I'll be eternally grateful. Now you look at this, August 27, 2017, you might be like, I don't really remember this. But then when you see it was tweeted from Houston, Texas on August 27, 2017. I don't know if you guys remember what was happening there, but it was Hurricane Harvey. So what it could look like in terms of analysis in an essay, considering the fact that Maritza Willis was tweeting from Houston during Hurricane Harvey, it is most likely that the rescue she's referring to is from flood waters. Many fire departments, other first responders, and civilians participated in mass rescues of people that were stranded on the roofs or unable to get to shelter. If you come back and look at this, it does not say anything about flooding. It doesn't say anything about Hurricane Harvey. So your knowledge of history, what was happening in 2017 would have, or my knowledge of that would have influenced what I wrote, because it wasn't in the document, but it was from my understanding of history. Let's go to the next one. Intended audience. Who did the author have in mind when they created, said, or wrote the document? You got to look for the big picture and who the person is trying to convince. Now, if this is very much like subtweeting. I don't know if you guys know what subtweeting is, but if you put a blanket statement out and it's like not intended at anyone, but you were thinking of someone specifically about it, you're thinking about someone specifically when you say it, the intended audience is that person you're thinking about. So you would have to have a really in-depth understanding of what's going on, what the person's like trying to do, where they're at, who they're speaking to, in order to get to the intended audience. And remember, for Hipp, it's how does that influence what was said? If it's a speech to your supporters, that's one thing. If it's a speech or a debate, that's something else. If it's, I mean, whatever the case may be, if it's a diary, it could be very different. So here's an example. This is a tweet. I don't know if you guys remember the solar eclipse from a few years ago. All hands or cameras on deck for solar eclipse 2017 today. What will you take pictures with? Don't forget to protect your eyeballs. So who is this Jack Fisher talking to? Now, usually when I do this, I ask students to kind of brainstorm whatever, so you can think about it right now and pause the video if you want. But the hashtag and the followers, so the first thing is anybody that follows Jack Fisher is going to get this. So that's intended, that's easy. But if you're familiar with hashtags, it's what's trending. So anybody that was looking at trending tweets at that time, the solar eclipse 2017, could potentially get his ideas. So that would be an example of intended audience. Now, he asks a question, what will you take pictures with? So his purpose is probably to get engagement on social media. So, which brings us to purpose. What is the person trying to accomplish? Are they trying to convince someone of something? Is it a threat? Is it a warning? Is it, I mean, what is the purpose that they're making a document? So you need to look kind of at the tone of the document as well as the context in order to get this. Propaganda posters are a really good example of purpose. Again, it has to be something that's not in the document. So if you just say the purpose of this document is, and you summarize the document, that's not Hipp. So it has to be something that's not written in the document. Okay, here's an example. This is Hurricane Harvey again. This was truly unbelievable. Thank you, Ellen. We're over 8.5 million now. That's from J.J. Watt, famous NFL player for the Houston Texans. Ellen DeGeneres said, when Texas needed him, J.J. Watt was there. I was honored to help make this amazing gift from Walmart possible, Ellen. So if you look at this, it could be, you might say, well, the purpose of this is they're trying to raise more money. It's an advertisement for the Ellen show. It's an advertisement for Walmart. You might look, and I know Ellen's been in the news recently, but you might look at this and be like, oh my gosh, Ellen helped donate over 8.5 million, but it wasn't Ellen, it was Walmart using Ellen's name. So, or through Ellen. And he also, Ellen DeGeneres says hashtag Texas, and then there's a link to the Ellen show. So there's multiple purposes here that you could get. Any of them would potentially be correct if you explain how that purpose influences what was written in these documents. So J.J. Watt attempting to convince his followers to donate to the cause of Hurricane Harvey. Ellen made the donation through Walmart, which is advertising marketing. So the last one is depending on its point of view, POV. Depending on the background of the person writing the document, how does their background influence what they wrote or why they wrote it? This one is kind of tricky, but once it clicks, it'll be really easy. So when you have any document, it will have a citation or explanation of where it comes from. So it usually will say the name of the person, what their occupation was, the year, what it is, journal, memoir, the title of the document, wherever it's taken from. Now, there's an acronym called ACORN PEGs. And these are like clues that if you have this information about someone that wrote a document or you're aware of it, you can kind of take from that and see how did that one of these things influence what they wrote. So age, young people, their message is very different from people that have been alive for decades. Class, people that are in lower class are going to have a very different opinion about events than people in a higher class. Occupation, a doctor doctor's message about COVID could probably be very different from a school teacher's. Religion, especially early in this school year, we're going to be talking about Protestant Reformation, Renaissance, stuff like that. Religion is a big deal. So if a Catholic is writing about a Calvinist or a Huguenot or whatever, that could be why. Nationality is going to come later, really with a Napoleon, but nationality could be something. Well, of course, the French person thinks that the Germans are, fill in the blank. Political affiliation, this would be later, probably 19th century in Britain, and then into the 20th century, but it could be like a political party. Education, someone is educated, are they going to have a different view about events than someone that has no formal education? So, or different types of education. And then gender is the last one, because we are going to be talking about feminism and women's suffrage and stuff like that. So all of those things contribute to point of view. So here's some silly examples. The music is too loud, turn it down. Joe Schmo, some grandfather in 2017. So if you look at this quote, if you just said, the grandfather said, the point of view is the grandfather, that's not point of view because you're not explaining something that's not in the document. If you said that grandparents and older people typically think young people play their music too loud, that could explain why he said this. Point of view. Agora High School sucks. Sylvie Lascu, CHS Junior, she's a former student. But if she was to say Agora High School sucks, she didn't say this, but if she was to say that, it would make sense that a student going to a rival high school would make that comment. Tattoos are the coolest, Mr. Lee. It's no longer at Calabasas, but if you've ever seen him, he's got sleeves. So it makes sense that someone that is all tatted up would say that tattoos are the coolest. Meat is murder. Ingrid Newkirk, PETA president. I don't know if you guys are aware of PETA, but they're against animal cruelty and things like that. So it makes sense that someone that is leading the organization that opposes like slaughterhouses and stuff would say meat is murder. Now, the last part is putting it all together in the essay. This is the package. So I think of it as a sandwich or hamburger, however you want to think of it. The first thing you do is introduce a document. Now, when you introduce a document, you don't say in Doc 1 or in Doc 2. You would say, according to the letter from Joe Schmo to his grandson. That's how you do it. In the introduction of the document, you need to briefly summarize what the document is about. So in the letter from the grandfather to his grandson, Joe Schmo to his grandson, he warns about the dangers of playing music too loud. That's a summary. Hipp's statement of analysis, considering that Joe Schmo is a grandfather and it is typical for grandparents not to like music being played too loud, his opinion and advice is consistent with what you would expect from a grandparent. And then the last one, tied back to the thesis, the two magic words are thus proving. Thus proving. So thus proving that the desired level of volume varies by age, whatever the prompt is. You kind of need the prompt for that one. But it's 3 sentences. You introduce the document, not by saying in Doc 1, but by saying in the letter from so-and-so, in the diary entry, in the speech, in the excerpt, whatever. So-and-so wrote, summarize it. Then you do your analysis. Why was it written? How did what you know in history influence what was written? And then thus proving, tie it back. Notice I did not mention quotes anywhere. No quotes on Hipp, ever, in my class or APUSH. The reason quotes are important, especially in English. The reason it's different is the DBQ it's 7 documents. Last year was 5 because of COVID. But it's 7 documents that for each document, historians pulled from a book, a novel, a collection of letters, journals. They pulled a quote out and they placed it in the DBQ. The person reading or grading them knows all of the documents. So if you're quoting it, you're not providing analysis, you're just regurgitating what the reader already knows. So it is assumed that the person reading understands what is written in the document. It's you are providing your knowledge of history and applying that knowledge of history to explaining why the documents were written and how that supports your thesis. On that note, here's an example. This is a generic example. In the letter from the soldier to his mother during war, he's clearly putting a positive spin on what was happening during war. The soldier most likely took this tone because he did not want his mother to worry about his well-being during the war. this further demonstrates how letters written by soldiers cannot be deemed as accurate. Now you put this all together, this is the same sentence as I had. When you were done, you would put doc for purpose. So the purpose of this is he does not want his mother to worry. I hope that helps. On that note, I'm done. I hope that helped you understand Hipp. Hipp is really important. We're going to be doing a lot of Hipp. So on that note, I will talk to you.